this work session of the Raleigh City Council. Mr. Manager.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Two items on your work session today. The first is just an update on New Bern Avenue Bus Rapid Transit Corridor progress as we get ready to submit our Small Starts grant. So transit staff, David Eatman, is here to begin the presentation. I'm sorry, Mila is going to give the presentation. Sorry about that.
Good morning. My name is Mila Vega. Can you hear me? Okay. My name is Mila Vega, and I will provide you an update on the New Bern BRT and some of the ongoing active initiatives that are also supporting implementation of the Wake Transit Plan. Okay. So this is a quick overview of the presentation today. Again, I would like to frame this discussion, as always, in the context of the Wake Transit Plan, mention some other active projects that we are working on to implement Wake Transit Plan. Then I will dial into the New Bern Avenue BRT discussion, provide you with a summary of the public outreach and specifically the first open house that we had in June to share design concepts and the feedback we received, and also share how that feedback was used to come up with recommended design for the run-and-way options that was used to develop a budget for the upcoming Small Starts application. And I will also mention community benefits discussion and some considerations that we are proposing to include in the Small Starts application, as well as I will cover some next steps for the New Bern BRT and other ongoing initiatives. So Wake Transit Plan, you've seen this slide many, many times, but for the benefit of the audience, Wake Transit Plan we are working on implementing Wake Transit Plan that was developed after the successful referendum in 2016. It has 4 big moves: connect the region, connect all communities, provide reliable transit, and this goal number 3, big move number 3, also includes bus rapid transit as well as high-frequency transit network, and create access to transit to communities that didn't have transit in the past. So some of the ongoing projects that we have that we are working on actively right now, we have obviously New Bern BRT, which is going through the design phase, early design phase from 0 to about 30%. We are getting ready to kick off Western Boulevard Corridor study. You can see that highlighted in orange. And I will provide more information about the upcoming public engagement opportunity. And also green, highlighted in green, is equitable development around transit, another planning initiative that addresses equitable development and affordability along transit corridors within the city of Raleigh boundaries. So this chart shows 3 active projects: equitable development around transit, New Bern Avenue BRT design, and Western Boulevard Corridor study. From start to finish, the green blocks, they designate the target and time for each phase, and you can see the little symbols that show main open houses, large public engagement opportunities, and between them, I didn't sprinkle in between to keep the graphic somewhat clean, but there will also be different pop-up opportunities, targeted outreach events. So as you can see, we have completed 2 grayed out for the equitable development and Wake BRT design open house, and I will be sharing some information with you. Western Boulevard, you can see the flyer. You can't probably read it, but I can just tell you what's on it. September 5th, there will be, something is happening. September 5th, there will be a kickoff event at the McKimmon Center from 5:30 to 7:30 with a presentation. So we are getting that geared up so we can start working on the Western Boulevard Corridor study, and it really has 2 main components: transportation and land use around it. So stay tuned, more information will be provided. Okay, I broke it. Okay. So now let's dial into the New Bern corridor, the main the core of the update for today. We did have an open house on June 25th at the Martin Street Baptist Church, and the purpose of that open house was to present various design options for the running way, various mix and match combinations. That's the beauty of BRT. It's very flexible. You can have various treatments in different segments and receive feedback that ultimately helped us to determine recommended approach as we are moving forward. So preparing for the public outreach, we used a variety of different methods to get the word out. We sent out direct mailers. We had notices on buses, notices at bus stops. We had digital signs. We had flyers. We sent out about 4,500 direct mailers, postcards. So we just tried to use various promotional methods to reach out to a diverse population. I have to say the most successful, based on the feedback, is social media and direct mailers. Those were the top, social media being number one. This is how people get the information today. So as part of that outreach, we had very good turnout. About 124 people attended the meeting. And then we had about 557 participants who participated online by completing a survey. We also received comments. We had cards. We had a comment wall. Again, at the meeting, we tried to collect feedback in various ways, whether somebody was filling out the survey, or they writing on the post-it and sticking it to a map or comment wall. So various methods of getting feedback. And we also had 37 subscribers. These are participants, online participants who are interested in further updates, and they signed up for alerts and information online. So we have really 5 main themes that came out of the meeting. People were very excited about having bus-only dedicated lanes that would bring faster, efficient, and more reliable service. There were concerns about bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure and safety and improvements that are needed to make the entire corridor more multimodal. And there were some questions about how would you enforce bike-only lanes and also overall safety and pedestrian access to the stations. But again, really excited about having high level of investment in BRT and that reliability it brings, and some work that needs to be still done on pedestrian and bike accommodations. We used the feedback that we received on different design options and came up with a recommended design that was used to develop budget for the small starts application. We really needed to have a better understanding of what that running way would look like to price it out, because once that application is submitted, the federal share, the federal participation is locked in. So I will take you through all these 3 segments in the following slides, but this map shows the entire corridor and kind of orients you. We have 3 segments, one from downtown to approximately Tarboro. Another segment is Tarboro to Wake Med, Sunnybrook Drive, and then the final segment is from Sunnybrook to New Hope. In the first segment, the recommended treatment is dedicated bus lanes running on the right, along the right curb of the roadway. So you can see the image below kind of aligns with the graph. In the second segment, the proposed approach is to, along the two-way pair, is a median running transit way. I'll show you a better image because that menu is right over one of the bus lanes. And the third segment is mixed traffic with transit signal priority to keep buses on schedule to still maintain that reliable service, and BRT stations. So now some of these design concepts a little bit zoomed in. This is downtown going around, it's the Blunt, Martin, and Wilmington, and Morgan going around the Raleigh station. So you can see the red lines. This is what is called business access and transit. These are semi-exclusive BRT lanes, and the reason they're semi-exclusive is to allow that business access to businesses or parking garages or anything else that basically a vehicle can enter BRT lane to get to their final destination. So you will notice these red lines go all the way around except Martin Street. At this point, we're not proposing any dedicated lanes in this segment because of some of the conflict points with garages and access to the Go Raleigh station. But this is generally what, and this is consistent with what you've seen as part of the downtown plan development. Continuing with segment 1, leaving downtown and heading towards Scarborough, the proposed treatment is the same: business access and transit. Again, those BRT lanes running on the right side of the roadway, with access to general traffic vehicles that need to turn into businesses along the corridor. Then the second segment, this is the segment between approximately Tarboro and Sunnybrook at Wake Med. So this is the median running transit way, fully exclusive, dedicated lanes. There is no conflict with general purpose vehicles will not be entering. This is just for the buses. So BRT lanes are located in the median, then they are buffered from general purpose lanes with small strips of median with plantings and landscaping, and then there's general purpose traffic and multi-use pedestrian paths and sidewalks. And then the final segment, this is once you go past Wake Med, so from Sunnybrook to New Hope, the BRT vehicles will transition into general purpose travel lanes. There will be still TSP to make sure that the buses are running on schedule, and there will be BRT style stations. So it's one seat ride from Go Raleigh station all the way to New Hope, where we are working on developing a transit center that will link ultimately to other routes across Go Raleigh system. So this is a quick summary of various design components. As we are looking at the design, we're also looking at different vehicles considerations. Right now, there are a couple of options. We can either go with 40-foot coach or 60-foot articulated. If you go with 60-foot articulated, there are options for having doors on both sides, left and right. This is especially important as we're thinking about building out the system in the future. This type of vehicle, specifically right and left doors, might not be necessary for New Bern design, but as we are expanding into other corridors and keeping that system thinking on, this type of vehicle will allow us to have more flexibility with design. So still working through some of the considerations. Now let's switch gears a little bit and talk about small starts application that we will be submitting on Thursday. The deadline is technically Friday, but we're trying to submit on Thursday to make sure that all files transfer, and we can confirm that with Federal Transit Administration to allow 24 hours for technical difficulties or anything else that can come up. So just to clarify, this application, it does define the amount of federal participation, so that is why it was really important for us to get back to the public, talk to them about different design options, and use that information to price it out, because whatever we tell FTA on Thursday is that's the amount that they will be anticipating, and that's the amount that they will be using to score the project as it comes to the federal share. It does define the overall project scope, length, mode, and termini, which you've seen already. That was in front of the council as the locally preferred alternative, which is defined by length of mode, start and end point, termini points, and alignment. And finally, it does not lock in final design. So don't think that just because what I went over with you right now is used for the budget purposes, this is not locked in. As we are going through NEPA, which is environmental clearance, and we might identify some tight points or maybe some areas where we need to maybe avoid a historic property, There's an opportunity to fine tune it. Again, the same is with station locations. They're not locked in. We have station areas. So I know you're probably asking when will this get locked in. It's approximately between 30 and 60% design. And as far as the schedule, it's right now, we will be at approximately 30 for the system by the end of this year, and we'll be starting on towards 60% as we head into the next calendar year. So for the roadway component right now, for the running ways, we are closer to about 30% just because we needed to price it out, but it's still not locked in. So we did not touch the stations or any vertical elements right now. We kind of have priced out general footprint to make sure if we are going with articulated vehicles, that bus can park in front of the station. And for the overall price, for the overall budget, right now we are about a 50-50 split, which is consistent with what with Wake Transit Plan assumptions, and we approximately for the overall cost is about $70 million. Which is, again, very close to what was assumed in the financial model in the latest work plan. And I mentioned in the beginning that there is also community benefits considerations as we were working with the community and getting some information about the overall project and potential impacts to the corridor. There are several aspirational goals and several themes that the community would like us to focus on and to include in the Small Starts application that will be submitted on Thursday. And they're really summarized into three main categories: gentrification mitigation, community engagement and empowerment, and heritage preservation. So we will be including this information in the Small Starts application, and we will be working with the community on addressing that and refining to make sure that we are moving in the right direction as this project progresses. And some key actions is and a couple of completed actions. FTA project acceptance complete. This council already endorsed the locally preferred alternative. That's complete. So the next big step is the application submission. The Western kickoff, I've mentioned that's happening on September 5th. We are also gearing up for the second round of equitable development around transit. There will be 2 open houses at the mid to end of October. And the second BRT, New Bern BRT design open house, we are planning for the end of October as well. More information will be provided shortly. Stay tuned. That concludes my presentation. I'm happy to skip to any other slides that I walked over quickly or answer questions.
I have a
Go ahead.
question. First, thank you for including the community benefits consideration part. I know we received some emails as far as working with the community from a community benefits agreement things. I know there's those are normally between developers and the community, but I think, we're definitely listening to the community and continue to hear that you say that we're continuing to work with the community as far as moving that forward. I feel is very important. The other thing I wanted to ask, and I know it's a separate project, but it has to do with the sidewalks that are going in. Is there any impact to that project, and as well as as far as fees or anything with BRT and construction?
So we are working closely with the sidewalk team. We are meeting pretty much weekly to coordinate the two. Right now they're moving as 2 individual projects. We're trying to identify various ways of moving that forward to minimize impact to the corridor and businesses along the corridor and residences. It's still work in progress, but we will be providing more updates once we are able to fine-tune the various approaches and also have a conversation with the community.
All right. And as we talk about the community to the council, I definitely want us to look at that assessment piece, the $47,000 that we're assessing. That is very small compared to this project and really the sidewall project itself, the cost to put that in and moving forward and possibly waiving that.
Okay, any other questions?
Yep.
Mr. Stevens?
Thank you. So I want to join with Councilor Branch. Thank you for including this community benefits consideration. Those three items obviously were identified by the stakeholders along the corridor, so it's great to see those in there. I guess my question is, jumping back to the small starts application, it seems like this is all about finding the sweet spot where you keep the cost low and the functionality high. But once you've done that, then you got to, with the submission, then you're fiscally constrained. And so whatever happens after that, you got to work back to that number that you submitted on the small starts application. Is that about right?
That's correct. So whatever the amount that we will be putting, just about 35 million, half of 70, 71. So that's the federal participation, because they will be using that number to determine metrics of, ridership and cost and various effectiveness factors.
Okay, so now going back to the community benefits to mitigate gentrification, I'm assuming that terminology includes mitigating dislocation. They're closely connected in gentrification, dislocation, right?
So the way FTA views dislocation is if the city or any project sponsor would have to go into the corridor and physically purchase a site to develop, say, a station.
Mm-hmm.
That could happen with larger projects like light rail or commuter rail.
Okay.
With BRT, we are staying within the existing right-of-way,
Okay.
so the dislocation that you are probably referring to is more of,
Indirect impacts, yeah.
increased cost. That is not an eligible expense. So as we are going through this conversation, we would have to identify resources to address expenses that are not eligible for federal contribution.
Okay, so that is the point I was trying to get at, and that is, so you've told me, if we believe that strengthening businesses and neighborhoods is going to be a goal of ours in this process, we're going to have to find those dollars somewhere else. Is that what I just heard?
Yes.
Outside of the takes involved in right-of-way?
Outside, yes.
Yeah, okay. All right, well, that's good to know.
Any other questions?
One more thing, and that is some conversations from the BPAC cycling community about how the route selection for BRT downtown, there was some question about whether it really optimized both the BRT corridor and the bicycle community, the high-quality separated facilities for bicycles downtown. Is there some more discussion going on about that?
Yes, there is more. I'm scheduled to go back and continue that conversation on September 16. Right now, we probably will start focusing on not just downtown, but because we have larger projects, it makes more sense to look at the overall corridor and buy accommodations along the entire, say, New Bern, because we are moving through design with that now, but we will be continuing that conversation. I know there are some concerns about what was presented in the downtown plan. As was discussed, the downtown plan was not really locking us into certain decisions. It did provide us a blueprint to start laying out BRT through downtown,
Right.
But there's still more room for discussion and modification if needed.
Okay. So just closing comment is this is hugely exciting for those of us who have been talking about sustainable growth patterns based on transit mobility, to see it finally coming so close. And it looks like it's, you guys are giving it a lot of careful thought.
Yes.
So I really appreciate that.
And again, did anyone else have a question?
Yep,
Yes,
Mayor,
please.
quick question. So what's the determining factors, and I know that is premature at this point, but the number of stations and the distance between stations, what's the determining factors for that?
Determining factor for what?
Locations?
Oh,
And
locations.
numbers.
I mean, there are several different factors, but if I would have to just pick two, existing ridership today, because before we do anything else, we want to serve the existing riders that made this corridor successful for transit. And another consideration is development patterns or growth patterns. So we work closely with planning to understand where some of those opportunity areas would be, to make sure we're not missing a critical location that will be a successful transit station in the future. Oh, and the half-a-mile spacing, yes, between
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you just said.
The spacing between stations is approximately half a mile, but it's again give or take. That's not
okay.
locked in, but that's a general rule of thumb to start thinking about where to put those dots.
Okay, thank you.
I have a quick question. In terms of whether it's a downtown or a two-way pair or a segment, those determinations were made by ridership or development patterns that are going to come along the corridor? How were they determined?
The running way options, so the running way design options, basically what that roadway looks like. That first, the biggest question is, do you have space? And what that space looks like. We're more constrained downtown. There was really one option, having dedicated lanes on the right, just to make sure that it works with all the other users and parking and loading docks and all the stuff that's happening downtown. One-way pair, again, we considered a couple of different options on the right and left. Right makes more sense because you can place it on either. Left is more challenging technically, so if you're not gaining the benefit of speed or reliability, why go through more challenging design where you're accomplishing the same thing with getting something more straightforward. And then the final, that the segment between Tarboro and Wake Med, we had 3 different options that we shared with the community. The one I shared with you today received the most interest because this is the most reliable BRT that you can build. It's completely dedicated, there's no conflict, vehicles get in the lanes and they just go, and there's also opportunity to do some nice landscaping, to buffer and to create more visual interest, plant some trees, and it's just the best BRT you can build. So because we have a luxury along New Bern to have that space, that's the best treatment you can do for the system.
And does that also mean in some areas we're going to have to shift the lanes over? I know we can't take lanes away, but we'll have to probably shift some over.
In some we would have to, because while in that specific segment we're trying to stay within the repurpose the median, but we are still adding the landscaping and keeping the general purpose lanes. The physical curbs will shift, but it still will be within the NCDOT right away, and we are working with NCDOT to make sure we're all on the same page.
Okay.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
So your second item, thank you, Mayor and Council, and also want to just say thank you to the staff. Multi-departmental staff work, although transportation is often up front, there's a lot of other folks that are working on that. So thank you for your support and for the hard work of the staff. Second item is a follow-up to an earlier question that was posed by the council about art programs within the city and looking at that from a geographic distribution perspective. This is also an item that was in your strategic plan, and this request was made many months ago. Sorry we hadn't brought it back sooner. We've had some scheduling conflicts, and this is an item that's kind of gotten bumped, but better late than never. The purpose of today is to really share that information and get any feedback you may have as we continue to grow our art programs in the city and make sure that we're serving all of our citizens. So with that, Sarah Powers with our Office of Public Art, or Art is here. Sorry,
yes,
Art overall. Thanks.
Good morning. Thanks for, or good afternoon. Thanks for having us. We're excited to show off what we've been doing in our newly acquired mapping skills. I have with me Kelly McChesney, our Public Art Director, to go into, she'll do some of the public art discussion points to go into the details a little bit better than I can. I wanted to give you a little overview about what we want to talk about, because this is a big question in many ways. Not only are there context in our guiding documents that were set forward with the Raleigh Arts Plan, but there's strategic plan initiatives around this effort. We would
There,
show
you can pull the mic a little closer
Sorry,
to
there's
you.
a keyboard in the way. Is that better?
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
That's better.
We also wanted to go over some of the mapping exercises that can kind of show you how our program has developed over the year. Public art specifically has grown exponentially since the program was put in place about 10 years ago. And then we'll talk about some of the strategies, because we're piloting a lot of great things and switching around our processes to get more community input and being able to turn that around to make sure the art we're spreading out is in fact what the community wants and needs. some of you were around when this was adopted. This was our 2016, the council adopted a community-focused arts plan. Raleigh Arts and the Public Art and Design Board and the Arts Commission have leadership in accomplishing the goals and objectives put forth through that, but it is a community plan, and our colleagues with the United Arts Council, our arts partners groups, our community, all have ways to help get the work done in that plan. I did want to point out one of the big changes that was made in the adoption of that plan is getting art outside of what we had been doing kind of to this point, which is using it as a tool to build a new downtown, gathering people, bringing folks to our amenities downtown, filling our theaters. There's great reasons for that. The artists get a lot of exposure being downtown. It's really exciting, and we've done some great work. Our downtown is awesome. And now we've got a little bit of a bandwidth to start moving it out and forward. And we certainly learned through this that our community is, throughout the city, very interested in expanding their access to the art. The Strategic Plan Initiative 2.4 is working pretty much very in the weeds, doing inventories, figuring out strategies to increase access to the arts through what we can do internally. They've looked at what is in our area and corridor plans. Our planning efforts throughout the city often point out opportunities where the community is interested. They've expressed their interest. They have great ideas. We can look into that. It's one of their first exercises. But they're also looking at tools. If we're building a new building, if we're a wonderful bus and rapid transit systems coming in, where are there opportunities and what does that mean? Art isn't everybody's first language, but we've been able to work with them to say, hey, if you want to exhibit artwork, that's pretty easy. Do you have a wall, maybe some light, or something like the shimmer wall, something more integrated, something in that scale. This is another end of the spectrum to build a museum or something specifically art. There's a big spectrum, but art can be involved in all the levels in most all of our facilities. And I think you would have seen this about a year ago in your strategic plan, but it just kind of points out these are where the area plans are, and they could kind of showcase. So it's a tool we can use. These are where the community has said we're interested. The white area doesn't mean anything is not going to be there. Just there aren't area plans that have been inventoried for this purpose. And now I'll turn it over to Kelly. I will say, since Kelly's been on board about a year and a half, our public art program has really, really expanded. So I'm excited that she can showcase some of that.
All right, thank you. So we've been working with people to help us map all of the art throughout the history with GIS, and I think that has helped us to see what we actually have and where we're going with it. We typically have 4 main types of public art that we consider. There's acquisitions, which can be donations, it can be community commissions, it could be art commission for specific purposes, such as the Acorn for the bicentennial of the city of Raleigh. There's a percent for art, which everybody should know, which is follows the CIP construction. And temporary public art is a program that we use because it's more flexible. I can engage more people, more community members. We can be more responsive to the needs and requests of community members, and also the local artists in the community have more of a chance to be involved and to showcase their artwork. And then there is also the newer citizen-initiated program, which is people who want to do art in their neighborhood or on city property. They want to know how, and we can help them move forward with that. So those are the 4 types that we map currently. Just to show you, before the public art program started, it was mostly acquisitions. You'll see here the purple stars. So there were 15 permanent works of art and 2 temporary public works of art during that time. And then this is a more current vision from when the public art program started to today. So you'll see that the percent for art is in the red bubbles, and the acquisitions are purple, and then the temporary public art is kind of our way that we can do a lot more and spread it out, and those are the yellow circles there. Just to go into distribution by type, acquisitions tends to stay inside the Beltline because a lot of people want high profile areas, or it's more collaborative. The shimmer wall is an example of that, as is, I have some examples here. Opie and Andy, the sculpture at Poland Park, was commissioned by TV Land for that park specifically, and then of course the MLK Gardens was commissioned by the community for that location. So it tends to be for acquisitions, a little bit higher profile areas, but we are working to try and spread that out into other parks throughout the city. The Percent for Art program, this is currently where we are. We've completed 11 projects to date, and they typically follow construction projects, or in the past they have followed construction projects. But the Public Art and Design Board has been using a criteria matrix to ensure that they are paying attention to equity, to access, what points of interest are around, is there walkability, and other points like that. And these are some examples. The public art piece at Buffalo Road was the first Percent for Art piece in 2012. That was the top image there. And then we move on to things like Halifax Park, which has integrated sculpture and worked with the community to do that. And then the Equilibrium at the Communication Center, which has another functional, it serves a function is to kind of stop people from coming too close to the building, but you can sit and enjoy the art as well. And the temporary public art program is the biggest as far as being able to produce the most projects, and in a quicker time period. We've completed about 148 so far. And here are some examples. In this, we do include citizen-initiated projects as well, because some of them are long-term. They can be murals, they can be mosaics at parks, and those typically could stay up, for many years. We also include the Together Raleigh bus wraps, performances in the city, and special projects such as the projection mapping at St. Agnes. And this is just a view of our kind of planned and in progress public art projects. This is just what we know is happening now, what's been allocated. We know more will be coming, but it's a view of the future, and you'll see we're starting to try and spread out.
Speaking of trying to spread out, I don't really see much of anything in District E. Are there plans to change that? I mean,
Yes.
it's pretty glaringly obvious.
So then there is with more temporary public art, but there is specifically, I think, another 1 or 2 public art projects that are on hold because they're with the streetscape projects that just happened. And I think one in that district that the Public Art and Design Board wants to focus on it's on hold for more community engagement. So we're waiting to see about that. So we're just showing what's been allocated so far, but there will be more. And that is, especially Lake Lynn area, we are looking. I just did a tour of all the parks in that district recently.
Thank you.
Same as your District A.
And so just to give you some examples of plan in progress. So we have an example of an acquisition, which is the Capital City Bridges you see. Chavis is a Percent for Art project, and then we have a temporary project happening at all of the outdoor pools where an artist is working with those aquatic centers to update their fences. Okay.
So we don't say we've got everything right and there's not art everywhere yet. So we're just getting started. And understanding that we can all work collaboratively to get there is, I think, really key, because as we expand the program, Kelly can get into detail, but community public art, the storm drain, something like that, can take a few weeks, whereas we could look at 5 years to get something for the Percent for Art program. So we want to have a range of ways to get projects going and be responsive to the community. So the first thing, and we mentioned it briefly, but looking at how public art projects and not only the allocation of funds and how those decisions are made, we did sort of expand what they're looking, what they're considering, and putting tools in place similar to how we would allocate grant funding, so that they're kind of scored and looked at, so that all of the things from project opportunity to geographic distribution are taken into place. Also, if we have community connections or information like that, what's the impact? Those things can be put into consideration too. And luckily, we have these decisions to make now. The program has grown enough that it's not just stuck with whatever facility is going. There is the full percent, and the way the projects are coming in, there's a little bit more decision making there, which is going to be very helpful as we go forward. And Councilmember Crowder, this project the punch list is almost there.
Almost there. So it's looking great.
Yeah, it is. Thank you. Our community centers and parks are very much spread out through the city. So we focus most of our pilot projects, figuring out how we can make this work, how we can get everybody on the team excited and comfortable with how it can work. Pop-up studios, we can talk about sort of art programming. If there was an art center in your neighborhood, what would it look like? What age would it serve? What materials would it do? So they've gone through tons of exercises and testing not only what materials, which age groups, what time of day, but how does marketing work best in each neighborhood? How are we going to be able to, is it drop-in? Is it pre-registration? Things like that. And they've got a lot of good data that we can now leave behind. The Creative Paging Project, Sensory-Friendly Saturdays are a great pilot for us to look at our community members that maybe aren't participating in arts because the programmatic opportunities might be far away from them, but reaching out, or they've got other barriers. But you saw on the map, the temporary public art is a great way for us to be responsive to the community, include local artists, and you really use it as a gathering tool, from the picnic, the Living Picnic Project at Dix Park, to how we partnered with St. Augustine's to do the Mapping Stories project at St. Agnes last fall, which really did tell the story of a very important community site that a lot of folks had not really been able to understand the significance of that site, but through a great partnership with the Museum of Art and these artists who came in from Austria but worked with 27 different local artists and students to really use technology as a way to tell the story of our history, but and also sort of activate a space that there's a lot of potential. The pop-up studios, like I said, brought in a lot of information. Part of the city this size, we want to make sure if we're going to invest in new art programs that they're sort of collaborative with the communities we're serving. So our community centers in the summer of 2019, obviously, lots of art opportunities and centers. This would change a little bit based on the sort of leisure ledger opportunities, what we can pull out of our system. But when we looked at the pop-up studios, we could sort of see that there was using facilities that didn't already have them and could spread it out a little bit more. And also giving a good amount of information about who's going to come by, how's it going to work, and what's the best thing to offer. Some of the data, this is a Raleigh zip code map, so it looks a little different than the other ones. But you can see the heat map, the darker green is by where the facilities are. So those pop-up studios, we did worry that we would put an art class in a new facility and the same people that were missing Pullen Art Center would just haul on over to the new one. But we did see a lot of really localized engagement. So that was good. Thesis proven, we can keep doing that. The other thing that's important is we spread it out and we're not looking at those like draw people downtown kind of public art opportunities. Just listening to the community, engaging the community, and building the relationships first is really important. We have great resources through all the area plans, through the arts plans. Those feedback, it's a great way to get started, but we also try to actively host listening sessions. Our public art community engagement now has a first step that they talk to the community before the artist selection criteria are set, so then they're much more likely to see their feedback instead of waiting till the artist is in place. So I think that's going to really transform how we look at, especially those bigger capital projects going forward. The pilots allow us to have data, allow us to meet new people and kind of track what success is so that we can roll it out into new areas with a good, with a good success rate. And we're hoping to kick off the public art plan development, which will even help us look into bigger policy issues, look at how to take some of these pilots forward, as well as look at holistically the whole city's public art plan. Being able to match artists with communities, being able to engage local artists, connecting everything, working on how to integrate all that feedback is an important part of what we do, but it seems to really help make the project sticky, and setting the artist criteria based on what the community needs. Is it the most aesthetically pleasing, or is it the artist that's going to really engage with the community and best with the students that are at that community center? So now we can redesign how we choose an artist using some national practices that give stickiness or community engagement or educational opportunities and beyond.
Do you think you squelch the artist's ability to produce something when you have that many criteria about what can and can't be done? Have you found that to be part of the stickiness?
I'd say one thing we've really kind of figured out is that if you have all that brought in after the artist is chosen, you're asking a particular artist with a particular ability to do A, B, and C, whatever it is. But if you start with what are these things that is valued? Is it storytelling? Is it, you know, creating a place? Is it, you know, something interactive and colorful? And then you choose an artist, you know, you advertise for those kind of artists. You're much more likely to have someone who's going to easily work with a community to get what they need, instead of saying, oh, we love this thing he makes things out of bricks, but you guys really want a bright, colorful, interactive piece. That's a lot harder to manage those relationships, and it's harder to see that feedback as it goes forward, because it's harder to really make an artist do something wildly different than what they're good at, and not a good use of anybody's time or money, because they're better to be a little freedom, for sure. So this is a map that shows the different city-initiated projects, but also the citizen-initiated. So getting back into how we can empower our community, we have a process that goes through the Arts Education Committee of our Arts Commission and the Arts Commission Public Art and Design Board if it's a big enough project. And that allows anybody to come forward with a percent per art project, or not percent per art project, opposite of that. They're a community-initiated project. They have an idea, they want to donate a sculpture, they want to put something, put a mural up at a community center. It's for projects on city property. It's reviewed, it's looked at, is this going to be safe? If it's temporary, is it going to be removed? Is it, you know, it's going to add value? And it helps sort of shepherd those through. Everyone can get all the right permits and there's no surprises. But it also allows our office to be kind of a concierge, so that help everybody navigate what can be a really intimidating process to get the permissions, both from the site managers to the community, because who to call, how do I advocate for permissions, but our office can handle that pretty easily. We usually have a couple a year. We had 18 this year.
Nice.
And then we got a bunch of television about them. So we think that'll really, really grow. The Sewer Ups project that we saw, and the Sandra Wimblish's project at Laurel Hill at Sassafras, really, really beautiful. They look good. They've gotten some attention, so we're trying to make sure everything we're doing is ready to accommodate more and more folks interested in making their own projects on city property. Another thing we're about to roll out, the Neighborhood Improvement Fund, is something I'm sure you're familiar with, but we're testing an art version of it, be similar in process, but it would be, our office would be able to help articulate what does this mean, how can you do it, what are the big ideas, what are the artists we can connect folks with, so we're hoping to get that out soon. We've also had wonderful partnerships with other city departments who have used arts to raise awareness about, you know, storm drains, to activate downtown streets, to create pedestrian safety and make a bike rack a really festive place downtown. We're also looking at some pilot projects with transportation for signal boxes and things like that that would be able to roll. Once we've piloted it, we know what it's going to cost. We can prepare folks to go forward and get it done on their own. And they've gotten great success. We also partner through funding and capacity building with arts organizations throughout the city that represent many different art forms, places in the city, different stories to tell, as well as different cultural activities. And we look at that as a way to keep arts active everywhere, because if the community's creating them and we can invest in what they're doing and allow them the creative freedom to do it, so win. Questions?
Anyone have any questions?
Ideas?
Y'all doing a fantastic job.
Y'all are doing a great job. Thank you.
Fantastic.
Just a comment is that you had a pop-up art studio for several days in Brentwood Community Center.
We did.
And I've received a lot of very good compliments about that.
Thank you. That was one of our really fun projects. They did and they activated the community center. There's all different art classes. I even took an art class. It's pretty cool. It's a neat community center. But they also did there's a little walking trail. They had sidewalk murals, and just to test, hey, if the folks are just there passively, or actually they're all running and jogging. They're not really, but could we get some more attention? Thank you.
Great. Thanks. Any other questions? Okay. Nothing else? The meeting?
That's it.
Okay, meeting's adjourned.